literally last minute before I took her off to her dad's house, and she freaking nailed it, like 98%.
Nice.
Like, yes, proud mommy moment. My kid's good. She's a genius. They're few and far between, so I got to take what I get.
How old is she?
She's 6. She's going into first grade, and then my middle child, my boy child, is going into third grade, and my oldest is going to be a junior.
Wow.
Yeah. It's been an interesting week of trying to do online orientations with every single one of their teachers, because there's 12 of them between the 3 kids. And so each one has had a different level of technical ability. So some teachers were spot on, and we got in, we listened to their presentations, we could ask questions. And then there was my boy child's main teacher, who I felt so sorry for him, because he was trying so hard. And at one point he came on screen, he's like, "Did everybody see the presentation?" And everyone was just, no. And the look of defeat on his face, he was like, "But I just said everything."
I feel like crying for him. Like,
you poor man.
Yeah, he's over 50, isn't he?
Probably.
Yeah. There's like this thing that happened about 2 years after I started university, where people like just grew up knowing.
Ooh,
that's a good screen to freeze on.
Right? And then we did like MS Word, like what was that? Like the typing program, like that stuff was like when I was finishing high school, and then like 5 years after that, everybody's like a genius. So it's like the under 40 teachers are fine. The over 45, 50 teachers, they're like, "I'll go on permanent leave." No.
They're working hard, even with the online stuff. And then we just sent my middle child. We have 4, so there's not really a middle, but she likes to think of herself as the middle child. Sent her off we sent her off to college on the other side of the state, and they're doing in-person classes. But what they've done is they've broken the semester. They've changed the way the semesters are set up, so they're only taking 2 classes. The classes are in the same classrooms, and they're with the same group of kids the whole time. So there is exposure, and there's obviously more potential exposure than there would be if she was doing something sitting here at home. But it's just interesting to see the way this works versus 4 years ago or 3 years ago when our oldest, Christopher, went to the same school. Just how much more locked down it is. They're doing COVID tests every week. It's just such a different environment now. But that's the world we're in at the moment until we get a handle on this thing. Things are going to be different. We've got to deal with it.
Although, was it March was the first year in like 15 years that there hadn't been a school shooting? It was something pretty like staggering.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. That's a whole nother depressing ball game there. But guys, welcome to Spilling Ink. we're back. We're live, and it's Saturday. I think I don't know this.
Yes, it's Saturday night.
Rain.
That's right. Live from the internet. It's Spilling Ink.
Yes. We've got 2 great guests with us tonight who have both been on the show. We've got Edward Willett and we've got H.M. Gooden. We're very excited to see you both, and I can't wait to have you introduce yourselves. But we've got to do the business stuff, and y'all know I can't do business stuff. So that's why I got to turn things over to Jane to do all the sponsor stuff.
That's right. You were gone for 3 weeks, Jane. We've now nominated you.
Okay. I don't have the text.
Excuses. All right, fine, I'll do it. And the boss may or may not be watching tonight because he's on vacation.
Ooh.
Yeah. Random. I mean, he never takes a vacation. That just seems weird when the boss goes on vacation. But anyways, all right. So our first sponsor of the evening, Go Indie Now. If you don't know about them, you should, because they are the online indie artist network that offers exciting new content weekly, monthly, and seasonally, all of which highlight, support, and promote indie artists of all types. And you can check them out at goindynow.com, subscribe to their YouTube channel, or check them out on Facebook, because you have to remember, it's always time to go with
with you now. We can't seem to time that so I can do it at the same time as you.
You should just do a recording of it.
Come on.
There was a banner that says now you can upload recordings to this program somehow. Have you researched that?
I haven't played with it yet, but I have seen it in action, and it is super cool. We should definitely look at using it.
Yeah, I haven't watched any tutorials or anything, but I feel like that could be fun. Well,
you know who uses it quite often?
Who?
Joe.
Really?
Oh yeah. All of his new shows, he's got great intros. He's got the feeds for his This Week in Indies. If you haven't seen a This Week in Indies in the last couple of weeks, watch, because you'll see what he's been doing, and it's really cool.
Okay. Do we have a way to get a hold of this mysterious Joe character?
Well, when he comes back from vacation.
All right. Well, everyone knows the lovely and terrifying Jane Taylor, the Mistress of Darkness. Hey, Jane, how you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm glad to be back. Thanks for, covering for me for 3 weeks.
Yes. Well, welcome back. And I'm gonna be ducking out on everybody a little bit early tonight. I apologize, but we actually have guests that are slowly filtering in right now. We're gonna do a little gathering here tonight. But even though I do know that my social life is more important than anything else, I feel like we should introduce these guests here. Edward, how are you doing tonight?
I'm fine. How are you?
And I'm doing really, really well. Could you tell us all about yourself?
Sure.
whole life history in 45 seconds.
45 seconds. Okay. My name is Edward Willett. I am the author of more than 60 books of science fiction, fantasy, and nonfiction. I should say the award-winning author, because I've won a couple. My most recent series is called World Shapers. It's the third book is coming out in September. It's called The Moonlit World. It's from Daw Books, and it's my main publisher. But I've written for many other publishers. And the other exciting thing I have coming up is an anthology with some very major names in it that I successfully kickstarted, and it's putting out with my own little publishing company called Shadow Paw Press. Which is named after our cat. That's why it's called Shadow Paw Press. So yeah, I live in Regina, Saskatchewan, Canada. I'm married to an engineer. I have a 19-year-old daughter.
That was pretty good.
I think you nailed the 45 seconds too.
I got this little clock in my head.
Well, and what type of works is Shadow Paw gonna produce? Is it gonna be all your own anthologies you're putting together, or?
It could be anything. I mean, I primarily started it because I have a lot of books that have come back to me from other publishers or whatever, and I wanted to keep them out there. Or things like my first book was a collection of my short stories. I don't write a lot of short stories, so this was 22 short stories, and the first one was written in the 80s. So that's how long it took me to get enough short stories together to do. I'm old. And then, but I also, the second thing I brought out was actually the First World War memoirs of my wife's grandfather, Samson J. Goodfellow. He wrote them late in life, and I'd seen them around the house. This is their house that we're in. It's almost 100 years old. And I put that out and, got pictures to go with it and edited all of his memoirs, and that got quite a bit of attention. So at the moment, it's mostly my stuff. And then this anthology is something brand new. I had never done this before. First time I'd kickstarted anything. And it grew out of my own podcast because it's authors who are on the World Shapers podcast that I do in the first year. So yeah, it's anything that comes along. Shadow Paw Press stands ready to publish it if it makes sense.
No, that's really, really cool. And I've got to ask you about the Kickstarter too here in a little bit, how you structured that. But Heather, do you want to introduce yourself and give us your life story in 45 seconds? You can do it.
Well, I am Heather. I write under the name H.M. Gooden, and I live in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. And I've been writing since I was young, but it wasn't until that middle of the night with the third in 3 years where you feel like this is all you're going to do till you die that I actually decided I would write a book. And he is 5, so I guess I've been writing and publishing for 5 years, and I think it really helps maintain my sanity. I have 3.5 kids because I have a stepdaughter who is 17, and then I have a 9, 7, and 5-year-old, and I work full time. So that's it. That's all I do.
I like it. I like it. Now, what about you, Jane? What's your life story?
My life story? Don't give me that look.
She likes to torture and kill her characters.
Yes, I like to torture my poor characters because I lived a happy life.
Well, and that's one of the topics we were thinking about talking about tonight. Jane is a serial character murderer. And so far, I mean, she's at least sociopathic in her tendencies. But recently you made a big decision that could change everything in your world, didn't you? Tell us about it.
Well, it's in the work in progress that I'm writing now. It's Grimm's Daughter. And yes, I was thinking, in talking with Katie, which is, somebody who I throw things back and forth on, I was like, I think I'm going to have to kill some people. And she's like, no. Please don't.
Notice how I'm the good influence here.
Yes, you are.
Make a note of that.
And she gave me a seed of an idea that I thought, oh, I can do something different with that. And I did not kill some of my favorite characters.
She sends me a chapter to beta read, as she does. And as I'm reading it, I notice everyone lives. What is wrong here? Not a single death. What happened? Are you feeling okay?
She's not killing people in real life now, right?
I wonder.
If it hasn't flipped, that would be my concern.
Well, I mean, if I could find a way, I found a way that it didn't have to right now.
I like that. That does translate to a good topic, because whether or not we're actually killing our characters, when we write, it's our job to torture our characters, to challenge them.
Yes. Oh, yes.
So how hard and heavy do you apply that torture all the way up to killing your character?
And how if you've done something and backed your character into a corner, how do you resolve it?
I mean, it's whatever the story calls for. So whatever your initial premise is, it's going to dictate how much torture they're going to go through. But there's no fun in having a character that sits around and isn't tortured, of course, because
unless they torture other people.
Well, that could be something, yeah.
And then it's an inner monologue.
Yeah.
Well, and I think you have to be mindful then, if you know you're going to be torturing your character, which hopefully you are, about where you start and how quickly things escalate. Because if you escalate too quickly, there's only a few places you can go. I mean, you've got murder, you've got some extreme assaults that are never fun to write or read, or you can go the psychological route. But if you escalate too quickly, you really not only back your character into a corner, but back yourself as the writer into a corner as well.
There's a rhythm. I mean, it's like you have to have that tension and release so that you get a breather, and then things escalate again, and then you get a breather. Maybe if you're Shakespeare, you throw in the Jolly Gravediggers or something, to break up the tension. But you can write a story, I think, where the tension is constantly rising, but I find those a little hard to read. You need to have a place where you can catch your breath, at least in a novel. In a short story, I think maybe it's different.
Yeah. Well, in short stories, you're just kind of driving it home the whole time down the field, so to speak, I guess. But yeah, and I just finished the newest James Rollins, who's just kind of a mass market thriller genre author, and I really enjoy them. They're fun, fast reads for me. And there's a lot of tension in his books, but he does it pretty well where you do get a little bit of a breather, even if it's only for a page or two. And I feel like it does kind of reset the clock a little bit, and then you can go back at it. So I think that's an important point.
Yeah, you don't want to stress your readers out to the point that they can't turn the next page because they're just so on edge. You want them to want to turn the page to find out what will happen.
Yeah, and I mean, you have to sort of pace your ratcheting up of the bad things getting badder and badder and badder until the climax of the book. So
there's a writing exercise that I've used the first time that was created by James Van Pelt, who's a science fiction writer, a short story writer primarily, and was also a high school English teacher. He created it for his English class. It's called the 7-sentence short story. And it is just a little plotting exercise. In 7 sentences, you get a complete plot in a short story. So you start with the characters trying to achieve something. That's in the first sentence. And the second thing is their action makes them further away from the goal. They take another action. And the fourth sentence is they're even further away from the goal. Then the fifth one is they make their final action. And then they either accomplish it or fail. And then you have the denouement. So in 7 sentences, you get this rise and fall of action. And it's an interesting little exercise, and it does kind of mirror what you want to do in a larger, and it can in fact serve as a Kickstarter to a larger work.
That sounds a lot like a simpler version of the beat sheets method that people use to plot things out as well.
Yeah, it probably is. I hear people talking about that all the time, and I've never looked at it or consciously used it. I do in my podcast where I interview other authors. It has come up a few times. People will talk about using that method.
Yeah, the book that I know of is Save the Cat, and I haven't actually read the book, but I have looked up the materials that it covers and the way that they break down their beat sheets, and they can have them as simple as, like, say 20 beats or, you know, all the way up to 100 beats. You can make it as complicated as you want, but essentially it's the same thing. It's marking those specific points of turning in your story.
Well, and it's, you know, even for people who don't like to outline, and I know, Katie, for a long time that you didn't like to do any outlines, but, you know, jotting down those key points, you know, is a lot like outlining. Or for you, what do you call it, Katie, when you do it?
Yeah, I call it the to-do list method.
To-do list. Yes. And I think that can be really useful, you know, especially, you know, if you're talking about something like what Edward just said, where you've got your 7 sentences to form your short story. You can take that and you can expand it and have that be 7 major points within a larger story that you need to make sure that you hit, and then kind of fill in from there and create an outline. And, you know, that might be a kind of an interesting way for somebody who's just getting started to work on plotting out an entire novel, but definitely starting shorter could be useful.
Another benefit to that too is, you know how writing the synopsis in the back of the book blurb is the worst thing for any of us authors to do, or for most of us.
We hate it.
If you do write those little, you know, 7 short sentences, beat sheet, whatever that you're doing, there's your synopsis right there with a little cleanup.
I just do the movie announcer voice in my head. There's a lot of voices in there, so
I love that.
I took that one for the blurbs. So it's always, you know, like Morgan Freeman's in my head. I try to outline, but then the people go off. I mean, Idris Elba ended up in the book that I'm writing right now. I don't know where he came from, and apparently he's also Merlin. I don't know. So I try to outline, but the blurb guy is much better than the guy that does the outlines. So
my problem is I have Samuel L. Jackson as my inner voice.
He's there sometimes when I'm really sweary.
The interesting thing about the have I mentioned my podcast? The interesting thing about the Road Trip podcast, it's just because I'm working on one right now, and I've talked to well over 60 authors at this point, and it's all about the creative process. It's theworldshapers.com if anybody wants to check it out.
Awesome.
I love
it's very much about the process, and it's these kind of conversations. And so you talk to people like Peter V. Brett, author of The Demon Cycle, huge best-selling author, and he rather shocked me. He writes 150-page outlines, and then he just fills it in and brings it, you know, from there. And then somebody like Kendara Blake, best-selling author again, she just kind of has that idea and then she runs with it. So
Yeah,
it's everything in between. Yeah. Some of this I do maybe, I don't know. You know, if I'm selling a book to Dawn, I'm selling from a synopsis at this point. So I do like, it ends up about 10 pages, single spaced maybe. And then I write it. I hardly ever look at it unless I get in trouble somewhere along the way. So I don't know. I'm kind of an outliner, but it has a life of its own as well.
Yeah.
Well, and I think as authors get used to writing and write more books, their original methodology changes, and each book kind of takes on its own way of being written.
Yeah.
I have
The
found that I
books are different
started to
processes.
dictate, which does need outlining if you're not going to get into car accidents.
Yes.
So I outline more now, probably because I'm like, okay, what was I going to talk about? More than because I'm actually going to follow that. So I do like a sentence per chapter kind of outline. So maybe the whole thing is a page. It's like, what did I want to go through? Oh yeah, and then it will end up often spinning out. But I do it on my way to work, and I can write like a chapter in 20 minutes or whatever. So you do need a little bit of an outline to, again, avoid traffic issues.
No, and
I've gotten so I do some points now, but I still am sort of like, oh, I have this idea, run with it. Or if I get stuck, and have conversations, I will write down, some of the ideas that were said in the conversation and keep them at the end of the book and look at them and go, okay, are they valid? Yes, no, whatever. But the ones that I've outlined to a T, I have never followed the outline. Because as you say, the characters are like, yeah.
Well, and sometimes it makes it more stilted too. Like if you're really, really trying to get on that outline and you don't allow your characters to kind of do whatever, I think sometimes you miss that creative part. Because I did do some co-writing with other authors last year, and it was a struggle because I was supposed to follow this general outline, and I'm like, but I don't want to write. I felt like homework more than creating. So
yeah, I did a not ghostwriting exactly, but a house name. Like this was there's a kids fantasy series called Beast Quest, and it's written under a house name, but it's like the Warriors books and stuff like that. They're actually written by multiple people for one name. And so they gave me everything. They gave me like, this is what has to happen. And boy, I struggled with that because it wasn't the way I would have told the story. And yet I had to stick. And the worst thing was, because it was written for little kids, I was not allowed to kill anything. Even the evil warthog things that are threatening the characters, all I could do was drive them off, but nothing could die. In the where we started, that was the hardest thing.
So unsatisfying. You want to see that evil character get their comeuppance on screen in front of you, so that you can feel justified that you went through the story with that character.
yeah, well, yeah,
I do like to kill the bad guys. I don't kill my good guys because I write happy endings. But in happy endings, the bad guys die.
That's right.
You all
As they
want them
should.
dead, right?
Well,
Yes.
and I think that one of my biggest pet peeves when I'm watching a show or reading a book is, especially if it's more of a YA geared book or movie, is when you get to the end and the bad guy who's done terrible things this whole time does one good thing, and that's like their redemption, and all of a sudden we're supposed to let them off the hook, and I'm like, are you kidding me? Really? I mean, I want to chop your ears off and like burn you alive still. I mean, I'm not satisfied.
With Darth Vader at the end when he
I'm not with My Little Ponies.
Right?
So-
I'm not watching them or anything, but it does kind of sound like Girls of Equestria, where like they're people with tails. I'm just saying. How old are you kids?
Yeah, we watch that in my house too. I can't stand My Little Pony.
But have you noticed the bad guys always end up being good guys in My Little Ponies? That's really the only time I've seen that. So I assumed you're watching My Little Ponies.
Well, I have seen every episode of My Little Pony. I'm not gonna lie, for sure I have. But Ed made a great point. It's the Darth Vader moment, and then that repeats later on in every Star Wars movie, is really. The bad guy does one redeeming thing at the end, but let's completely forget that he's murdered billions and billions of people.
All those patterns.
That doesn't go away.
And I mean, it makes more sense now that I've seen, like we started with 4, 5, and 6 there, and then you went back to 1, 2, and 3, and then whatever. it makes sense why he had that redeeming.
Yeah, the last
thing.
3 are kind of whatever.
Yeah, but it makes sense because you're just like, why did they give him a pass at the end there? And you're like, oh, because he started off as a good guy and he let his anger warp him, blah blah blah.
Yeah, but that's
He
the
also
thing.
blew up Alderaan, so
Right? I mean,
That's what I'm saying.
like growing up in Saskatchewan, so I got it. I understood where he was coming from.
Well, and that's where I feel like we have to also respect our readers a little bit, or if you're making a film, your viewers a little bit, and knowing that, okay, people are going to want justice, or they're going to want at least satisfaction from certain things. You don't just get to be redeemed unless you've really redeemed yourself. If
Like,
if I grew up as a good person, and then I murdered people in my teenage years, and then in my 20s I'm like, oh, I'm a good person again. I don't get to be a good guy. I'm still the bad guy,
an anti-hero now, like Deadpool.
Deadpool's great.
Reverse of that, the Game of Thrones, the TV series, not the books. They sent the Kingslayer down a couple of season-long redemption arc where he actually actively worked towards redeeming himself, and then, spoilers for anyone who hasn't seen it, screws it over in the last 2 episodes of the final season, where he just returns to who he was before.
Yeah.
Well, yes, a leopard, and he had spots.
Ah,
That's right.
They ruined the satisfaction of that long drawn out redemption arc by just no, he's the same guy.
Was anything about Game of Thrones truly satisfying?
Yes.
Right? So I think they did that to mess with you intentionally. And I think you probably liked it a little bit.
No, I was screaming at the TV when I saw it.
Well, there was a really satisfying part, but in I think it was first season, like episode 5 or 6, something like that, when Danny's brother gets all the molten gold poured down his throat. That was satisfying.
Good. Yeah.
But we all wanted to do that to one person.
And when Jeffrey got killed off, that was satisfying.
Yeah.
Wow.
Some character deaths were
I have
very
3 brothers,
satisfying.
so there's been many times where, like, I'm pretty sure they got a lot of the murder stuff out of Game of Thrones from like my ancestors' history. I mean, that whole Red Wedding thing, like, that was totally Clem McDonald. Like, they messed that up. You do not kill people when you invite them into your house. Like, that's just not cool.
Think of all the cleaning you'd have to do.
Well, it was stone floors, and you didn't. You just threw like fresh straw down. It was fine.
You had dogs to lick up the blood, so it was good.
That's true.
I grew up on a
They
farm.
love that.
Happy about that. You eat dogs for a reason. That's where your leftovers go.
Yeah, your floors are never dirty when you have a dog. That's true.
That's very true.
Katie, do you ever read survival games of mine?
No, I don't think I've read that one.
Okay, because that one, the character starts off bad and actually has a redeeming arc. So.
Okay. But you don't destroy it at the very end, though, do you?
What?
Don't you?
She totally does. She just like she looked to the side. I think that's the lie.
Yep.
Right. Did you look to the left?
The really bad guy got his comeuppance. So.
That's what we want. That's what we look forward to.
Yes. So that happened, but yeah.
Come up and say the murder. Yep.
Yes.
Well, I'm gonna be ducking out on you guys here to tend to my guest here, but it was lovely to see everybody, and everybody out there watching. Thanks so much for being here, and I'll see you next time.
See you next time, Jason.
Okay.
Oh, look at that.
Her head got a lot
Bigger than
bigger.
it used to be.
Yes, we got bigger.
Is anybody else bothered by their reflective glasses right now? Like, I'm trying
always.
to
Always.
I took off my reading glasses so they wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
If I did that, I'd be blind, and then I would never know what's going on. So.
Yeah, I wouldn't be able to see the comments or anything.
Well, I usually take my glasses off at the computer anyway, because I find that I've gotten to that stage of life where I think my arms are getting short. I don't know. Does anybody know?
I have to get my new prescription and because my other glasses broke, so I'm wearing an older prescription. So I'm like, okay, can I see?
I'm waiting for mine to change and be perfect again because they assured me that I had laser eye surgery like 10 years ago and it was good for 6 and then I had kids and then, like need glasses a little bit. And they're like, oh, don't worry about it because like when you get nearsighted in your 40s and stuff, like it'll cancel out. I'm like, okay.
The lies they tell you.
I'm waiting.
Yeah, no, I'm blind without my glasses.
Now, are you farsighted or nearsighted?
Who?
Either one of you.
I'm
I've
nearsighted.
always been nearsighted.
I'm blind as a bat, but I wear contacts. But now I need reading glasses over top of my contacts.
Oh, no.
I've never done the weighted thing.
I used to be a -4 and now I'm like a -1. So theoretically, I don't need them to legally drive, but then I'd be like this.
I think I'm -14 and a half or something like that.
Wow. I didn't know that was a thing.
That's severely nearsighted.
I have a friend who's -8, and I thought that was
focus here without my contacts.
Mm. Yeah, no, I can't see far. I can't see near. I have an astigmatism in both eyes, and they're too steep for anything.
Yeah, I have astigmatism, but it's like not much.
Yeah.
But they have really cool new lenses out. It's like a bionic eye.
Ooh.
It's about $5,000 an eye right now, so hopefully it comes down in price. But instead of getting a cataract surgery, we're getting like bionic lenses, and
Ooh.
they sound amazing.
Yeah, my
That's
optometrist
something
keeps saying
that
that's
becomes
coming for me.
available and cheap
A
enough.
total lens replacement. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, but I'm gonna wait till they're not $5,000 an eye.
Yeah. That's
Yeah,
gonna be
that would be a little costly.
But if you need cataract surgery anyway, and you go for the upgraded lens, then it's only a little bit more.
That's kind of what he's telling me. I'll cut cataracts, just a hint of them. And once I need that done, then it'll be a total lens replacement. And I don't know what I'll do with myself if I don't have to put things in my eyes.
when you actually open your eyes and can see in the morning.
Yeah, that's weird.
The reason I did get the laser eye surgery back, like in 2005 or 6, was because I was really tired of going swimming and hitting my head on the side of the pool. So I can still do that. So as far as I'm concerned, it's still a win. But that's what you will do. You will not hit your head on things when you're in a swimming pool.
That is important.
There's not a lot of
There you
classes
go.
wearing heroes in fiction.
Yeah.
I think
I always think about that.
it's such a pain. It'd be such a pain to deal with, right?
Yeah. I give my
I've never done it, and I've worn glasses my whole life, and I don't think I've ever created Of course, if I'm writing a fantasy or something, that's different. But in things that are written more or less here and now, I don't think I've ever put glasses on a character. And now I'm thinking, why not?
you should.
Yeah, I don't know if I have either.
Because
I know
it complicates things.
Perfect.
Yes. You're yeah.
Especially in Regina in January, because actually now it doesn't matter because we're wearing masks and stuff. So it's just like glasses fogging all the time.
Yep.
I'm totally writing that.
When I switched to contacts, that was the one thing I really loved, was my eyes not fogging up every time I walked into the house when it's 30 below outside.
Yeah.
Remember those wax crayons that you used to be able to like write on your glasses? What did the blind fish say when it hit the wall? Bam. We had these like little, it was like a wax crayon, and it like you rubbed it on your glasses and then you rubbed it off, and it like kept it from doing that. Did anybody have that?
Yeah, there was like a salve that I had that I would do that with the glasses. But after a while, when it wears off, you can't find it again. So
I think I saw it sold for car windows, something like that. I don't know if it worked or
My
not.
dad's a mechanic, so it's possible we were using
for
car
anything
window
glass.
covers. Yeah. Come to think of it,
When we moved up here from Texas when I was 8 years old, all the cars had these things called frost shields. Now, am I probably the only person that's ever seen one of those? But they're these little, you put a little dead space, so you stuck them on your window, and there was a little dead space between this plastic shield and the glass itself, and then it wouldn't frost up when the rest of your window frosted up.
Yeah, we had a 67.
They went away. I don't know where they went.
Yeah. They stopped making them because windows got better in cars, but we still use weather stripping in our houses in Manitoba. So you just go to Canadian Tire because you need
I
Canadian
got
Tire.
everything.
Right? They got everything. It's like Home Hardware, Lowe's, or whatever, but it's Canadian. And you can buy like $20, and it's basically like Saran wrap for your window with double-sided tape, and then you use the blow dryer.
Blow dry it.
I-
Wonderful. It's like
We
the
used
best.
to do that at the condo. Yep.
And if you look at triple pane, they're like $1 gajillion, or the $20 weather stripping package. Even if you replace it every year, better.
We were
There you go.
talking about Game of Thrones, and the one thing that bugs me a lot in fantasy, and has always bugged me in Game of Thrones, is that living where we do up in Saskatchewan, and up here, it's never cold enough in those scenes. Like they're out there north of the wall, and they got their hoods thrown back, and I'm thinking your ears froze in 30 seconds. What are you doing?
And they never do that nose move where you go like that, because it's -20 when you do that.
Yes.
Break apart, and you're like, yeah, -20, nose froze.
Yep.
I don't know.
I don't
I had-
recall that being in the book text either.
No, it should be in there
Yes, it should be.
for veracity's sake.
When
Yeah.
someone I know, when I worked at the Weyburn, I started as a newspaper reporter and editor, and somebody had moved out there to join the newspaper, and she was from Sarnia, I think, in Ontario, southern Ontario, and they'd driven a long way in the wintertime without getting out of the car and hadn't noticed that the temperature had dropped. So they got out of the car, and she took a deep breath. Because the lunch was, right? Not really, but that's the sensation. And you don't see that in fantasy either. It's never cold enough. It's because everything's filmed in California and places like that.
Yes, even in our heads, right? We're like, Well, I am doing a post-apocalyptic work in progress set in a post-pandemic Calgary with the full fascism on display. So it's going to be awesome. And it'll be very realistic.
When it comes to writing the stories, though, how much detail of these types of things do you actually put in? Because we can pick them apart after the fact and go, oh well, they didn't include this, they didn't include that. But when you're actually writing it,
I have made a point, and at least one novel that had winter stuff, to make sure that it was as cold as it was supposed to be.
Okay.
I had a book written as Lee Arthur Chain, one of my pseudonyms, called Mage Bane, and it's set in a fictional. The landscape is Saskatchewan, except for the mountains and the giant lake of lava in the north, because I needed that. But otherwise, it's Saskatchewan. So the bad guy lives in the Capel Valley, which is not far from Regina. And there's two cities, and the main city is basically Regina's surroundings, and it has a lake, which Regina has, Wascana Lake, in the middle of it. And the king lives in a marble palace on the south side of the lake. Well, the Saskatchewan Legislative Building is nicknamed the Marble Palace, and it's on the south side of the lake.
And they have very scary ducks that bite you.
Yeah, they're
I'm not traumatized.
and I made it because it was wintertime. I actually made a point at one point of there's this dome where it's always spring inside around the palace, and a magical shield. And actually, my house would be inside that shield if this was that. So I think that's probably wish fulfillment. But once they got out and he's in the snow, and I had a point, he was out there and it was like 30 below, and he's barefoot. I can't remember why, because we torture our characters. That's why.
ouch.
And he had to have the healer working on the frostbite there because it was really, really cold. And I tried to make that real cold thing happen. It's hard. It's probably a little hard to get across, I guess, because cold is invisible. But
I think if you feel cold, when somebody's writing it correctly. But if you're from somewhere where it's never below zero or below freezing, I think it might be hard to explain to someone.
Yeah,
it's maybe hard to explain how much it can hurt.
Yeah.
I wonder, for people who don't know, what it feels like to be in the cold, if the authors who are writing these stories just assume that everyone does, and that's why they kind of skim over some of these details. And for a person who doesn't understand cold, they're not going to get it. They're not going to know.
And of course, that's our challenge. Everything we write is
really, really cold water, like the ocean and rain, or
it's like touching a fireplace. Like that's actually what it feels like. Your pain receptors cannot tell the difference between extreme heat and extreme cold. It's the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And there's actually some really, really twisted research studies that look at things like that with, putting your hand in a bucket of cold water and like pain tolerance and things like that. I think the women always win. But.
So the challenge then for the author is to how much detail do we put in when we're writing these scenes to give the right perspective without slowing the pacing down with too much description.
Or like what it feels like to fall into like a snowbank, like being on it and then in it.
Are you talking about a booter, or are you talking about like naked, like whole body? Because
no, not naked, but
because I think again, growing up on the prairies, most people have a really good idea. It's like you're totally fine because you're dressed, and then you've got like a band where it feels like your leg is on fire, where the sock and the pants don't touch.
Right. Yes.
And exactly, Regine, I sneezed and my boogers froze before they left my hood. That's January in Winnipeg.
Yep.
What did you mean?
And that is not something a person who doesn't ever see cold or experience cold would understand.
Right.
I wrote
a very good description.
Yeah. I wrote a short story set in like the North. It's kind of more of a traditional legend telling about a Wendigo, and it's set in January. And I mean, I froze myself writing the snowmobiling scene where she's going out like on the back of the snowmobile with RCMP, because I was just like remembering how cold that is on your face. Like you can't move because it's frozen solid, like it's numb. You have no facial expression ability. So I think you can always overwrite it and then clean it up later and remove some of that. And then when you have people beta read or edit or whatever, you can ask them, did you feel cold reading that?
It always comes back to what serves the story, and it can become self-indulgent as well. So you have to always strike that balance.
I'm an under-describer generally because I'm like, I skim that stuff when I'm reading. So I'm like, oh, this is beautiful. Like, oh, there's a really beautiful The Bone Witch by Rin. I think it's Rin someone. And it's like the most beautiful fantasy novel I've read in a long time. And it's just like these wonderful scenes, and it like really gets you into the book. But it's really hard for me to read that because my attention span is way too short now. So as much as I loved it, like I could read a chapter or two and go, this story's amazing. Okay, I'm going to go cook some supper, like wash something. And that was weird for me because I was into the story and yet having a really hard time reading it because of the actual description.
I recently did the same thing. I reread something that I had written from the perspective of a desert rat, because that's where I come from. And, everyone says it's a dry heat. And I took time to explain what that dry heat feels like. How it's, the instant sweat and the wind sandblasting all of the dirt to your skin and that gritty feeling. And while, it's a great description, when I reread it, it was like, this is the kind of stuff I would probably skim over, but it's that world building detail that I think people should understand. So where's the balance?
And that's where you got to get somebody else to read it, because we're always like bored by stuff like that if we've read it like 6 times. But if, like you said, get somebody that knows what that feels like to read it and see if they're skimming it or if they're like, that's exactly right. And then
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Beta readers, that's what they're good for.
That's true. That is
I don't use them. I never have used them. I never have had them is the real problem.
So what is your process then? How do you...
I write it and I send it to my editor, and she's the first one who reads it.
Ah, okay.
You started with traditional publishing, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I lived in Weyburn, Saskatchewan, and the writers group in Weyburn, Saskatchewan was 6 elderly women who wrote stories about the Depression.
Probably one of them.
I thought they were elderly, right? It was the 80s. They would have been kids in the 30s. So they were, probably the age I am now. They were elderly. But there just wasn't anybody there, and everything was done by mail, and I'd send out stories. And I sent a book to Tor once, and 2 years later, I finally got in touch with them, and they said, "Oh, we lost that." That was the pace at which things happened.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I didn't. That's basically it. I did have. I shouldn't say never. There was some writing. There used to be. It was called the Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers Workshop. It was run by Kathleen Dalton Woodbury out of Utah, I think she was, and it was critique by mail. So you would send your novel off to somebody else, and they would send you theirs, or you would read it, but boy, it would be like 6 months before you got the feedback. And eventually, I was writing so fast that that just didn't work too much for me. But I did find a couple of really good critiquers at that time that were very helpful, and they both went on to become published authors before I did, in fact. So that was good. But after that, it just kind of I just never got in the habit. And so I just do it myself. And almost not everybody, there's in the people I've interviewed in the podcast, there are people who don't use beta readers like me. And I do think they tend to be sometimes older authors, maybe, who started a little further back.
Traditional.
It's a real thing now. I mean, everybody that I've talked to recently, like newer people, all seem to do it.
Well, in the other method of doing it, your editor then becomes not only your beta reader, but your editor as well. So it's getting a higher level of critique, and revisions, are the same. You still get notes of what you have to change and
fix. My editor at DAW is Sheila Gilbert, and she's been in the business since the 80s. And she's read thousands of manuscripts and edited, all kinds of bestsellers and everything. And it's amazing what she finds. So even when I think I really nailed that,
it's like, it's perfect.
No. 2-hour film conversation, and then I write 25,000 more words to fill in the stuff that I didn't quite nail, because I tend to get longer in my revisions.
See, yeah, we do too, actually, because again, I don't know, I get around 50,000 to 60,000 words, and I'm like, yep, I'm done. Next story. I want to talk about a different thing. So yeah, when I go through the edits, it does tend to expand by 10,000 words, even when I'm trying to cut it down.
It tends to be characterization, or maybe things that I knew really well, but didn't put enough on the page for the reader to get it. And yeah,
beta readers are good, because I find that I usually I've seen people do up to 10 or 20. I don't know how they do that with my head would explode. If you can get 3 really good beta readers that write in a similar genre as you, they can really go, yeah, I didn't understand what you were doing there. That's helpful. That's really helpful.
I did just use one on something I'm working on now. I had one person look at it. So, small steps.
I like getting, 3 to 4, because then you get a good varied opinion. And I tend to go with the same people now because I trust their opinions. But originally, I would look for other authors that write the genre as well as readers in the genre, because the authors will be a little harsher and a little more able to point out specifics and technique, whereas a reader might go, "Oh, that was great," or I need a little more information in the chat. They're more vague about their responses.
They're better as that ARC reader, can you leave a review about how much you love it, which is awesome. But they don't tend to be as this sentence structure is weird. What did you do here? Right. I like that. I need that, because again, I don't always show my work, and a good beta worker.
Beta worker. Join
a new phrase here.
I'm like, beta worker. That sounds like somebody who has I'm going to write that down. Yeah, I have a list of 300 ideas that I'm going to get to one of these days.
Yep.
Yeah. I still have 40 some books to write.
I have 6 to edit, because this dictation thing has helped with some of the getting of the ideas out. Has created a separate new problem that I did not anticipate, which is 60,000 plus word first drafts. And I still have a full-time job and kids. So
yeah, I work full-time too. So
I've got a different bottleneck.
My kids are grown at this point, but yes.
I get up at 4:30. So I can get some stuff done, but not that kind of editing.
No.
And yeah.
No, and that I think takes the longest. I mean, writing is the easiest part, as hard as it is. It's the easiest part.
Is easy.
Yes.
Everything after that is the draining part, where you really have to take your time and you really have to go line by line, look at each scene, look at each character, make sure they're right. And that a lot of new authors don't understand. That's
Right.
where most of the work is done. That first draft is the fun part.
Yeah, I love the editing process too, but it's like that love-hate, because I love what happens to every book while I'm revising it and editing it, and I would say, like, I probably go through each book at least 6 times, because you write your first draft and then you clean it up and then you clean it up again and then you send it to your editor and then you send it to your beta readers and then you clean it up like a few more times, so like 6. But every time you do it, it gets better, and then you want to read your story again. And
I get to the point. I get past the excitement, past the loving it, into when I get to the point where I hate it.
then it's ready.
I know it's done. It's like
See,
I'm done.
I
I'm
stop
done.
before I get to that stage, because again, my attention span is too short. So if I could get to the hate it stage, they'd probably be way cleaner. But there's always squirrels. So I just,
Yeah. Oh yes.
How about you, Edward? How many revisions do you end up doing?
Probably before it goes to the editor, it's about 4 times through, and then after the editor comes back, it's another time through, and then of course it's the page proofs time through. So six.
Yeah, that sounds about average. Yeah,
like a really good number. I've heard Dean Wesley Smith talk a few times about the writing into the dark, and I'm like, I don't know how one would do that when one has spelling and grammar issues, but because he just writes one copy and then that's like it for him.
Well, and again, going back to the people I've interviewed, there are some who do a rolling revision, so they're revising all the way through, going back and revising, and so they get to the end and they're basically, John Scalzi says he works that way. It's a rolling revision, and it gets to the end and it's pretty clean. On the other hand, Robert J. Sawyer had a great quote from, there's another Canadian author named Ido Van Belkom, a horror author, I think, mainly. And I think this came from him, but the first draft he calls the vomit draft. So you just, you get it out there and it's a cute, horrible mess and you have to clean it up, but you feel so much better.
It's like you were sick, now all of that food poisoning's out and you can just recover now. Yeah.
Again, everybody does it differently.
That's exactly how I think of it too. It's the word vomit phase, where you just get it out, get it on the paper, and you have a hot mess first draft, but at least you have something to work with.
And that's why I like it.
Good. It's not clean and it needs revision, but I rarely do any major revisions on the basic thing.
Like the plot stays the same.
Fleshing it out and adding characterization, and every once in a while I have to deal with some plot point that I kind of just skimmed over, thinking Sheila won't notice that, and Sheila always notices.
They always notice.
They always notices. Absolutely.
Like Tanya Huff and Julie Sheneda, and
oh God, I love Tanya Huff's stuff. Oh.
Yeah, we all have this thing in the back of our head: is what would Sheila say? And we talked about it because we've been on panels where we talked about it, and it's always this. You think maybe you can get away with it, but if in the back of your head there's that little thing going, and sure enough, and then you have to fix it. And if you'd fixed it to start with, it would have been better. But
as you get better, you do tend to fix it before sending it through.
I would think.
you would, yeah.
Okay, you make the attempt.
That's the I think the best part about dictating things is you get that you basically just talk, right? So you're not, it's like your inner editor is driving the car right now, so it actually isn't part of the writing process. And then when I get wherever I'm going, I usually try to build in an extra 15 or 20 minutes so that I can like fix the dragon speak. Because sometimes I'm like, cheese pizza, that's not in here at all. That's what I meant. So there's other extra fun mistakes, but you can also clear up some of those awkward sentences just going through it. So it's almost like a second draft by the time you're looking at your first draft.
I use transcription software for the podcast so that I can do a full transcript. And of course, that takes editing. And you get some funny results sometimes. There's one thing I'm talking about writing process, and so people will say, well, are you a plotter or a pantser? The transcription software always translates that as Panzer, like the German tank. Are you a Panzer? Yes, I'm a Panzer. There's one, I don't remember what they actually said, but the transcription put it out as not getting enough sex, and that was not at all what the author had said. So I have to be really careful about editing that stuff.
So one thing that I find very helpful, if you're ever trying to figure it out, say it, whatever your transcription device said, say it out loud fast. Because when you say it out loud fast, you're like, oh, that's what that sentence means.
Your mental filter puts the right word in.
If you ever need it, this is a service called Sonics. Sonics.ai is the website, and you have to pay for it, but it works quite well. And the thing is that you can play it, and it does little, not follow the bouncing ball, but little highlights the words that it's saying, and you can hear it, and you can transcribe it and make your corrections right there on the website, and then you export it as a Word file, and you can continue editing over there. So it's been a lifesaver for wanting to do full transcripts. And I've got some nonfiction work coming up where I'll be interviewing somebody, and my hope is that it will work really well for that. So instead of taking copious notes, I can just conduct the interview, and I will have the notes taken for me, which will be very good. I'm reading notes here. I'm a tank, but break down often and sometimes overheat.
I'm enjoying you, Rebekah. I don't know you, but I think I want to.
Rebekah is actually our second show sponsor. She's one of our other bosses.
Well, I love your boss, because that is awesome.
She's one of my beta readers too.
And under my pen name, she's also my publisher. So she's the boss in multiple levels.
Well, she's clearly quite awesome, and I didn't even know she was your boss, so it's not me kissing up.
But yeah, no, I mean, yeah, I like the Panzer thing.
That would be a fun thing to call yourself.
Yes,
I am a Panzer author.
My mother may have called me Hurricane Heather growing up frequently, but I am a second, so I have a second, and dear Lord,
out of how many?
Well, I'm the second. I've got 3 brothers, so
okay.
That middle, not middle. That's why I was like, oh, it's the second, isn't it?
I'm truly the middle.
Yes. Well, I have the middle, and a week after I brought her home from the hospital, after having her, I was like, she's going to be in charge of something someday. I'm just not sure which side of the prison bars it will be on.
Now, what is it for the third child?
I believe that's the Mind Gamer, but maybe that's just my personal.
Third child are the best. Speaking as a third child.
Well, but if it's a baby, it's different. The babies are always sweet.
No,
but
not mine.
If there's like another one after that, the third is the Mind Gamer, because they've got 2 older siblings that they've watched and learned from, and learned how to like stay out of trouble, and then they like use all of their evil on the younger one.
My third will rule the world one day, and we should all hope to be on her good side when that happens.
Zoe?
Yes, she has a reputation.
Yeah, well, I'm not worried about peer pressure for that one. Let's just put it that way. It's if she's ever in trouble for setting something on fire, etc., it's not because somebody convinced her to do it. It definitely was her idea.
There are many
I only have 2 kids, so.
You have one?
I only have 2, but my oldest is now pregnant with her second child, so.
Yes.
Nana, and it's a girl.
And did you do the curse to her? See, my mom cursed and then took it back. I mean, I've heard of people being cursed by their parents. Oh, I hope you have a kid just like you someday. I've never heard anybody else's parents try to take it back.
No.
That. You're like, I hope one day you have a kid like you. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean it. And then you're like, what does that mean? No, I know.
That means having a 5-year-old kick you and run at the mall and scream at you. I hope you lived through that.
Yeah. I believe it's the sometimes I get so mad I just want to kill them. I'm like,
yeah. Well, she's
writing it down. She's Evil one. Look,
He's 25. My youngest is 20. He's going to be 21 in December. But yeah, it's just like, it's like freedom now. Huh?
Are they close in age?
5 years apart.
Do you see that's a safe distance?
Well, my daughter got used to being the only child, and she was very angry that I had a boy, not another girl.
Oh, well, yeah, but if you would have had a girl, it would have been fine because then it would have been her doll.
No, well,
Right? You would have dragged it and like
she would have been the demon child
shaved
for
his
a while.
hair. So yeah, mine are 3 years apart.
Yeah,
Like all of them together.
That's a good spread.
No,
That's
I
a
mean
fun
like
gap.
the oldest was 3.5 when I had the youngest.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't remember a lot of that time. I remember when my second was about 18 months old, you kind of just like, I was out for a walk and I remember it was like, I blinked and I was like, oh, hey. I was like, I woke up and I was like, I was pretty sure I was awake the last 2 years, but it felt like I woke up. I was like, oh,
It's a fog.
It's autopilot. It went to autopilot.
autopilot for 2 years straight.
Yeah,
And then of course after the third was born, like it was just easy by that time. So that was why I was like, I need something to do with my life. I'm gonna start writing books at 2 a.m. right? Because that's what moms do. It's like I can't sleep anyway.
There you go. Use your time wisely.
Vampire Academy phase and Psych. I was watching a lot of Netflix, put it that way.
All right. Well, we are out of time, guys. I want to thank you too for sharing your time with us and to our audience as well for listening in, and to our sponsor, Rebekah Jonesy, who is the author of Realistic Fantasies, both fiction and sexy. Excuse me. Let me read that again. Author of Realistic Fantasies, both sexy and killer. Don't let me get that wrong. The boss will get her cattle brought out. And no, I'm not joking. So thank you guys all for watching. We will be back next week with more people to introduce you to and some more fun conversation. Remember to like, share, and subscribe. Spread the word, and we will see you then. Bye, guys.
Bye. Thank you.